Hi everyone and welcome back to TechCravers. In today's video we're diving into, yeah, you guessed it right, the fastest and easiest way to start with emulation on the Steam Deck as of May 2025.
Oh shit, here we go again.
This time though, I'm keeping it simple, really simple. Like I said, we're focusing on the easiest way to get started with emulation, how to install emulators, where to put your games or ROM files, and those annoying BIOS files that no one seems to understand the purpose of. So grab your Steam Deck, something to drink, sit back, and let's get into it. There are a few things I highly recommend you get before starting this. First up is a wireless keyboard and a wireless mouse that you can pair with your Steam Deck. Trust me, it'll make things a lot easier. Sure, you can do everything using the Steam Deck's built-in controls, but it's just a lot more cumbersome. The last thing I think you should prepare ahead of time is a USB drive or external hard drive loaded with your favorite games, or ROMs as they're called. You're going to need access to your games a bit later in this guide. Once you got everything ready, press the Steam button on your Steam Deck to open the menu. From there, select Power and then choose Switch to Desktop. Open your browser. By default, it's Mozilla Firefox, and if this is the first time you're in desktop mode, you need to install it first. But once it's open, click on the address bar and type in emudeck.com. This will take you to EmuDeck's homepage. EmuDeck is the tool we will use to install everything we need to get started. And remember, we're doing it the easy way this time. If that sounds like your kind of thing, don't forget to give this video a like so more people will find it too. Now click on download in the top right corner to go down to the downloads section. You'll see a few different options here, but since we're doing this on the Steam Deck, you want to download the version for Steam OS. You'll be asked whether you want to download the free version or support them on Patreon. It's totally up to you, but for this guide I'm going with the free version. The download should only take a few seconds and the file will land in your Steam Deck's default downloads folder. From there, just drag and drop it onto your desktop for easy access. And you can now close the browser as well. Once the file is on your desktop, double-click it and then click Continue in the first prompt to launch the EmuDeck installer. On the first screen you'll see two options, Custom Mode and Easy Mode. Custom Mode lets you tweak just about everything, like how your emulators are configured, which filters and bezels to use and so on. But as I said a few times already, we're keeping it simple in this guide. So this time we're going with Easy Mode, which installs everything using EmuDeck's recommended settings. So tap that and then click on Next. On the next page you'll need to choose where to install the emulators and configurations, either on your Steam Deck's internal storage, an external SD card, or a custom directory if you want to set the location manually. I've got plenty of space on my Steam Deck, so I'm going with the internal storage option, but you can choose whatever fits your needs. On the page after that you need to choose if you install it on a Steam Deck or an Ambernic Win600. The next page is a new addition in the latest version of EmuDeck. It asks you to choose your level of integration. Basically, it's asking whether you want all your games to launch from a single app or frontend called Emulation Station, or if you prefer to use Steam ROM Manager to add your games so they appear as regular Steam titles in your Steam library. I prefer the latter, so I'm going with highest here, but if you rather launch all your games from Emulation Station, then go with low. Once you've made your choice, click on it and then click Finish in the bottom right corner. This will kick off the installation process. EmuDeck will now download the recommended emulators and automatically configure them for you. And don't worry, you can always add or remove emulators later using the EmuDeck tool if you change your mind. The installation will take a few minutes. Once you reach the installation complete page, you can review what EmuDeck has set up for you, but go ahead and click Next to continue. On the following screen, choose the option to manually copy your games. And then click on Open Emulation folder on the next page. Close any prompts or folders that EmuDeck opens for you and instead just click Next in the EmuDeck installer where it says Waiting for manual copy. Then go ahead and launch Steam ROM Manager and finally click Finish. You can now close the EmuDeck installer because next we're going to manually transfer our games or ROM files into the correct folder on the Steam Deck. Open Dolphin on your Steam Deck, that's the file explorer for Steam OS, and navigate to Home and then to Emulation. This is where EmuDeck has installed everything. Inside the Emulations folder you have the ROMs folder, and there you'll see a bunch of subfolders, each corresponding to different retro gaming platforms. This is where you'll need to place your game files. So for example, if you got a collection of Game Boy Advance ROMs, put them in the GBA folder. Game Boy Color games go inside the GBC folder, GameCube titles into the GC folder, and so on. You get the idea. Each folder also contains a helpful text file that you can open to check which system it corresponds to and what file format it supports. Now it's time to grab your external hard drive or whichever device you're using to store your games. Of course, you can also download games directly onto your Steam Deck if you prefer. Just remember to always follow your country's laws regarding what is legal and not to download. You can also check out my video on how to create your own ROM files from the games you already own. I'll make sure to link it in the video description down below. Anyway, the idea here is to simply drag and drop all the game files you want into their corresponding folders inside the ROMs folder that I just showed you. I'm transferring a PS2 game here, and just a heads up, those are a bit special since they require BIOS files to work, but don't worry, I'll cover that in a part a bit later. For now, just focus on finishing up the transfer of your games. Once your games are in the proper folders, go ahead and open the EmuDeck tool from your desktop. First, click on Manage Emulators in the menu on the left. Scroll down and select Steam ROM Manager. From there, click Reset Configuration in the top right corner. This will update and configure Steam ROM Manager for you. Once that is done, open Steam ROM Manager from the list on the left. First, click on Choose, then select your Steam account from the list and hit Save. After that, just click Next to continue. On the next page, you can choose which system Steam ROM Manager should add to your Steam library. They are called parsers, but I won't go into details right now. If you're unsure, just leave everything as it is and then click Add Games in the bottom left corner and then hit Parse on the following page. Steam ROM Manager will now fetch artwork for every game and emulator it detects, assuming you placed your ROM files in the correct folders earlier and that the appropriate parsers were enabled in the previous step. Now, I want my games to show up in gaming mode later, but not my emulators. So here I'm choosing to exclude the emulators. Just tap on whatever you want to hide and it will be removed from the view in gaming mode. Just make sure you click on Save Excludes when you're done. There's a lot more you can do here, like hiding or showing specific games and systems, changing artwork and more, but I covered all of that in other videos. For now, let's just make sure everything we've set up so far is working. Click Save to Steam to update your Steam library with the newly added games. And once that is done, you can close Steam ROM Manager and EmuDeck and head back into gaming mode on your Steam Deck. From here, press the Steam button and navigate to the library. Then, check the Collections tab. If everything was done correctly, you should now see a folder for each system you added games for. In this guide, I only added 3 games to keep things simple. Each game should launch and run just as intended, with controller layouts and everything already working, since EmuDeck has taken care of all the setup for us. But as you can see, the PS2 game God of War 2 isn't launching. So does that mean that EmuDeck isn't that great after all? Not quite. The issue here is actually those BIOS files I mentioned earlier. PS2 emulation requires BIOS files to run properly. So let's jump back into desktop mode to add the necessary BIOS files, and while we're at it, why not throw in a few more games too? How about some Nintendo 64? Back in desktop mode, I got my PS2 BIOS file saved in my downloads folder, and I'm going to move it to my desktop for easy access. Next, I'm heading back into the emulation folder that EmuDeck created for us, but instead of going into the ROMs folder, this time I'm opening the BIOS folder. Different systems require their BIOS files to be placed in specific subfolders, but in this case of the PS2, I know that the BIOS file can be dropped directly into the root of the BIOS folder. Now open the EmuDeck tool from your desktop again, and this time click on the BIOS checker in the menu on the left. As you can see, the PS2 BIOS is now green lit, meaning everything is in order and ready to go. But before we go back and test it out, let's just add a few more games while we're at it. Open the ROMs folder inside your Emulations folder again and then locate your games. I'm going to drag and drop my N64 games from my external hard drive into the N64 folder on my Steam Deck. And to make those new games show up in gaming mode, I just open EmuDeck again, launch Steam ROM Manager and click Add Games followed by Parse. This time it'll grab artwork for all those new N64 games, so it might take a little longer than before. Once that is done, click Save to Steam and make sure to wait until it says Done adding entries before closing EmuDeck and heading back into gaming mode. Back in gaming mode, just tap the Steam button, head to your library and open the Collections tab again. Now you should see a bunch of N64 games added and ready to be played. But what about that PS2 game? Did adding the BIOS file fix it? Well, let's find out. Of course it did, because let's be honest, that would have been a pretty terrible way to end this guide otherwise. I really hope this video helped you get started with the latest version of EmuDeck and that you now have all your retro game favorites running smoothly on your Steam Deck. If it did, feel free to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and maybe even share it with a friend who's struggling with emulation on their Steam Deck. Thanks so much for watching, I'll see you in the next video.